Alright, okay, so hello dears! Ayan, so welcome now to the third video and hopefully the last video on the serological tests for syphilis. And for this video, we're going now to start with the newer technologies no, in syphilis testing. But before we start, again, just mga additional reminders that I forgot to mention. Sorry naman, no? In the second video. For congenital and neurosyphilis, the tests that are much more recommended are your non-troponemal tests because your non-troponemal tests are highly sensitive compared to your troponemal tests. Now, in congenital and neurosyphilis, it could be that the troponemal tests cannot identify or cannot detect the antibodies, okay, to syphilis. All right, so it's best that you detect or you use the non-troponemal tests. Non-troponemal tests, yung VDRL, RPR, trust ng mga tests for congenital and neurosyphilis. And for neurosyphilis, especially for neurosyphilis, the test that is much required or recommended is your VDRL. Okay? The VDRL. That's why natay CSF VDRL. Wala sa RPR, di ba? So CSF VDRL. Because a positive result of VDRL in a spinal tap or in spinal fluid is considered to be diagnostic of neurosyphilis because the chances of false positive or mga biological false positives in your spinal fluid is highly rare. Okay, so munang positive result for VDRL daw in the CSF or spinal fluid is diagnostic of neurosyphilis, VDRL. Okay, now for VDRL and RPR, amount of serum that you use is about 0.05 ml. Okay? And using the Hamilton syringe, 1 drop of the antigen lang. Okay? So 0.05 ml is about 50 UL. Tama ba? Yeah, 50 UL or 0.05 ml of serum. Okay? And aside from that, what are some of the diseases that can cause false positive results in your biological false positive? That's what we talk about. That's what we mention, or that's what we mean about biological false positive. It's a false positive result caused by other diseases. So for non-troponemal tests, diba, it could be mga infectious mononucleosis, varicella, even mga autoimmune diseases, SLE, and even rheumatoid arthritis. Diba? So kabante mo na, rheumatoid arthritis, kay sige na siyang, ang rheumatoid factor, sige na siyang mo interfere, no? Kay pabibo siya. Okay? And even mga malignancies also. So there's a wide range of diseases that can have reagent, okay? That could cause a false positive result in your non-troponemal tests, okay? Alright, so those are for the troponemal and the non-troponemal tests. Now we go now to the newer technologies in testing syphilis. And we'll start first with, of course, mga enzyme immunoassay. You also have even chemiluminescence immunoassays for syphilis. You have immunochromatography, your kits, and of course, PCR or polymerase chain reaction. Okay. Now, we'll start first with enzyme immunoassay. With the name itself, diba, we have discussed this in the labeled immunoassays part. They are detected or developed to capture a specific class of antibody to T pallidum, either IgM or IgG. So on this slide, you have anti-IgG and anti-IgM on a microtiter well, okay? And then you add the serum with patient antibodies, okay? And these patient antibodies will then be captured by your antibodies on this microtiter well, okay? Which would then, it will be captured, and of course, adani mo siyang enzyme label, okay, and then the substrate, and then of course, usually leads to a colorimetric reaction or change in color. Okay, alright. Ayan, so captured anti-TP plus the enzyme labeled troponemal antigens. Okay, so you will now react, the patient anti-TP reacts to troponemal antigens. And after washing, again, di ba, enzyme labeled man, so you add a substrate, they will react and then, of course, produce usually a colorimetric reaction. Okay, na change in color. Okay, now for immunochromatography, still the same. Usually detect antibodies pa rin against T pallidum, IgM, IgG, or IgA. So the patient antibodies, okay, di ba, movement is there. The patient antibodies to T pallidum will then be collected or will be captured, okay, by this T pallidum antigens gold colloid. So they will now react, okay, and then here in the T pallidum, in the testing site, no, so there's already an awaiting, no, or an activated na T pallidum antigens, and these antigen will then capture the complex na na-form, di ba? Okay, and then the excess reagents sa control and sa absorbent, di ba? So if ever the patient has the antibodies, di ba, this will lead to a color line, a purple line or red ba, on the test line band, which signifies a positive result. And for control, then a line. Diba? Always, always take note, diba? Sa labeled immunoassays, we have emphasized for test kits, it's important that there's always a control result, because if wala control result na na test control, a test line na result, then it's considered invalid. Okay? Because your test is faulty. Okay? Kung wala may control. The control serves as, again, it makes sure that the agents are working properly. Diba? Alright, that's the purpose of the control. Okay, so again, to evaluate your kits, there should always be a control. Okay? Alright. Ayan. Okay. And lastly, of course, for PCR, by the name itself, PCR, it amplifies or isolates a sequence ng of DNA. Okay? And that is unique to a particular antigen. Of course, I think you're much more a master, no? You're much more excellent in this kaysa nako. Ang PCR, you have molecular diagnostics man, so I'm sure you already know that. Okay. And the newly made DNA is subjected to agarose gel electrophoresis using a technique known as Southern blotting, di ba? I'm not sure if I mentioned the mnemonics for that, di ba? You have snow drop. So Southern detects DNA, Northern detects RNA, kani siyang O kay filler lang na siya, filler. And Western detects proteins. Ayan, di ba? So mnemonics. Southern blot detects DNA, Northern blot detects RNA, Western blot detects proteins. Okay, di ba? Ayan. So wala pa Eastern, so baka kayo na yung makadiscover ana. Alright, okay. So, that Southern blotting detects DNA. Okay, alright. And again, apply to testing of virus tissues, spinal fluids, swab samples for the presence of treponins. But this PCR in routine diagnosis, again, it's not performed that much, because again, this takes time, and aside from that, it's costly, no, and it needs high awareness, no, and technical capabilities of your people. All right, so usually we settle with serological tests for syphilis, but in the future, if there are mga discrepant results in serological tests, then we can confirm, or we can use that. We can use PCR for that. Okay, because again, PCR is really like much more sensitive, much accurate, highly specific pag yun. So it's really a test that can detect even, or can solve mga discrepant results. Okay, all right. Now we go now to your testing algorithms. Okay, so what are testing algorithms? So parang these are the procedures, no, or same sa HIV, diba? So parang mga procedural tests. Okay, steps, no, on how to perform a test, or how to diagnose syphilis on a sample. Okay, all right. So for traditional testing traditional testing algorithm, again, kato akong i-mention, we first perform a non-treponema test. And a positive result man good in non-treponema test does not mean that you have syphilis, diba? Because again, there are a lot of possible biological false positive reactions. That's why every positive result in a non-treponema test, we subject to a confirmatory test, either a treponema test ba, or katong mga newer technologies, diba? Alright, so this traditional testing algorithm is still recommended by CDC. So here is your procedure. Initial screen with a non-treponema test. If it's non-reactive, it's negative for syphilis, so no further testing. But if it's reactive, possible syphilis, so it's still possible because again of biological false positives. So we perform a treponemal test for confirmation, TPPA ba or FTABS. And if it's non-reactive, it's biological false positive. Kaya ni positive man siya sa VDRL, pero non-reactive siya sa imuhang treponemal test. So it could be a biological false positive. Maybe it's caused by IM, rheumatoid fever, rheumatoid factor, or varicella, katong na mention. Okay, and if it's reactive, then it's really positive for syphilis, untreated or recently treated ba na case. Okay, so that's a simple algorithm, traditional algorithm for diagnosing syphilis. Okay, that is still recommended by CDC up to now. Okay, but newer laboratories, because of automation, no, because of mga newer technologies, enzyme immunoassays, katutanan, they developed a new algorithm which is called your reverse testing algorithm. For the reverse testing algorithm, instead of starting with a non-treponemal test, you now start with a treponemal test, which is automated. So you start with either enzyme immunoassays ba, or you have FTABS or TPPA. So you start with that. And then if it's positive, then you proceed to your non-treponemal tests. So ang non-treponemal test na mo confirm sa imuhang sa imuhang sa imuhang troponemal test. So ang advantages lang kay saves cost because if sa sugod pa lang, sa troponemal test pa lang daan, positive na imuhang patient, you could already say that it's really syphilis. Because diba, troponemal tests are much more specific. So you don't need to perform pa another test which is your non-troponemal test because sa sugod pa lang, positive na siya. Okay? Whereas, diba, sa traditional, if positive pag yun siya sa non-troponemal, kailangan needed yun, required yun na mo proceed ka o another test which is troponemal test. Either FTA-ABS or TPPA or whatever, diba? But for the reverse, sa sugod pa lang daan, kinagsugod mo kang troponemal test, you don't need, if mo positive na siya dito, you don't need to proceed further. So you see, it saves cost. Aside from that, it can potentially detect more early, late, and treated syphilis because of the higher sensitivity of the specific troponemal tests. Yes, higher sensitivity siya. And even, it's much more specific. Although na-mention nato na sensitive ang non-troponemal tests, it could be that naagya po'y ma-overlook. Okay? So, basically, that's the advantage of that. Okay, it saves cost, and aside from that, mas early, potential pa lang to detect early, late, or treated syphilis. Okay? Alright, because of your troponemal tests. And because this may be missed because, diba, once in the traditional algorithm agud, if negative na imuhang non-troponemal test, we don't proceed further, diba? Okay, if negative ng non-troponemal test, then it's said na negative gid siya for syphilis, diba? But what if it's still early in the course of infection? What if dili pa jud din na nakataas iyahang reagent antibodies, diba? So it's best good that that's why muna siyang the reverse algorithm can detect these early. Potentially mas makadetect siya early or late or even treated syphilis. Okay, so muna siya ang mga advantages niya. Alright. CDC recommends that if laboratories will use this reverse algorithm, all discrepant results should be tested reflexively, meaning i-test po siya again using TPPA test as a second confirmatory troponemal test. So, if example, FTA-ABS ka una, and then ay discrepant results, then you perform your TPPA. Let's say, like, ni positive siya o FTA-ABS or sa troponemal test sa una. But then, pag-abot sa non-troponemal test, kay negative siya. Okay, so it means that it could be that it's still early in the infection. It could be biological. It could be that early in the infection pa lang, or nadyo yung mga discrepant results, or late na sa syphilis, or wala ni reagent antibody kaayo. So it's best that you confirm na po with your TPPA. And if it's positive, then it's really syphilis. But if it's negative with TPPA, then it means that it could be early pa in the course of infection, or it's still developing, or treated na ba ang syphilis at the time of testing. So the patient still needs to be monitored, okay, and look for mga symptoms pa rin. So this is an example of your reverse testing algorithm. So here's a picture. Ayan, so EIA or CIA, di ba? Enzyme immunoassay or chemiluminescence immunoassay. So mag-start ka with a troponemal test. If it's negative, then it's considered to be negative na yun for syphilis. But if it's positive, you use quantitative RPR or other non-troponemal tests. If it's positive, then it's really syphilis, past or present. But if it's negative, you then secondary confirmatory test, which is TPPA, recommended by CDC. If it's negative, unlikely ang syphilis, or could be early pa at the time of testing. And if it's positive, then syphilis is there, past or present. Okay, ayan. So basically for RPR yun, the purpose why we proceed with your non-troponemal tests after a troponemal test and the reverse testing is that we want to confirm. So siya na mo mahimong confirmatory. Kaya diba, if the patient really has syphilis, then you are expected that there is reagent, diba? It's one of the diseases that reagent is produced ang syphilis, diba? But in this case, diba, if negative ang RPR, it could be that it's early in the infection pa, or it's not really syphilis, or sorry, or there is really syphilis, diba? So you need to perform pag yun if ang RPR is negative. So why do we perform a non-troponemal test after a troponemal test is usually to detect if there is an active infection yun. Because it's during active infection na, diba, reagent is high, mga primary stages of syphilis, diba? So it's important that we detect that also. That's why troponemal test, non-troponemal test after the troponemal test. So it's reverse testing, reverse siya sa traditional. So mas maunang troponemal kaysa non-troponemal tests. Okay. Alright. And yes, that's the end of our lecture on syphilis serology. So it's quite short din naman. I think medyo carry lang. I hope na-gets lang po siya. And yeah, so mura to siya. So in this setting, I think our remaining lectures will be like this na in my house. Okay. Alright. So I just hope lang yun na explain siya tarong. Okay. So do not forget syphilis. Usually lumalabas pa rin sa boards mga serological tests, especially mga VDRL, RPR, yes. FTABS, yes. So always be familiar with this. Okay. So if you have any questions, again, if you have something that you don't understand, again, feel free to chat me or chat sa atong group chat. Okay. We're almost done with ISBU. So next ani is no, actually before ani di ay mas nauna na ako siya record. Before ani is hepatitis serology, viral hepatitis. After ani kay the last lab activity na to is salmonella, serology for salmonella. And the miscellaneous topics are mga lectures na lang, like serological tests for the other diseases, like bacterial, parasitic, viral. I'm not sure if apil pang fungal. Fungal, and then mga immunogamopathies. And I think may include po dato we'll discuss a little about COVID-19 serology. So, we'll try our best if makaya pa siya sa atong time. Okay? So, we're almost done. We're almost done with the semester and you'll be interns na. So, I'm all proud of you. Sana naman interns kayo lahat. I hope yun. And I think ma-interns mo tanan. So, very exciting. One of the best years. I think my most favorite year, yes, ang internship. If I'm not, I think, yeah. Okay. But anyway, again, that's all for syphilis serology. Again, feel free to chat me. Di na dyan dapat maulaw. Kapit ang mga ng semester. Nako. Okay. Alright, so that's all again for syphilis serology. Thank you, dears, for watching and for listening. And I hope, again, I was able to deliver and to discuss this lesson properly. So I'll see you in the next pre-recorded lecture, dears. Thank you again so much. Have a great day and keep safe.